There's a lot of nonsense out there today, religious and otherwise, and you don't have to look very far to come across it. Sometimes it just kind of falls into your lap, like happens today. That's what we're going to do, a slight departure from our normal fare, because as my channel's tagline says, I'm just exposing stupidity wherever it hides. And there's an awful lot of stupidity out there, isn't there? So let's go look at some more. So, we're going to do a video today that has the potential to piss a lot of people off. Okay, fine, whatever. You know I don't pander to anyone. I'll explain how all of this came about in a second, but sometimes I just go down a random rabbit hole and I decide to make a video about it, even if it does fall somewhat outside of our normal wheelhouse. This is one of those things that I hope people think about, because I think it's clear, and I hope you will think so too by the end, that some people aren't thinking about stuff, I mean. So let's get to it. So this is going to need some significant setup, so let me explain. A while ago now, I wrote and recorded this whole video 2+ months ago, so that's a while. I was having a discussion in the comments of another video, something about religious philosophical arguments for God or something like that, and I said something along the lines of, in cases like this, philosophy is useless. And somebody else popped up and disagreed with me, and we got into a pretty lengthy discussion about things that philosophy's good at and things that philosophy is bad at. And as it turned out, he was a complete philosophy fanboy who is convinced that philosophy is the most important thing ever since sliced bread, and all the answers to everything in the world are held by philosophy, full stop. Now, I disagreed, and he sent me a link to a bunch of pro-philosophy videos, presumably with the assumption that I just watch a couple of videos and magically change my mind. Instead, I watched a couple, and I spent the entire time either rolling my eyes or just laughing my ass off. That's why I decided to do this video, which is part of the series that he sent me, just to show that you don't need philosophy for a lot of these things. And yes, I am aware that according to some people, everything that you do is automatically philosophy, so there, but I'm not playing that game. That's about as dumb as saying, well, everything you do is just worshiping God. No. Just no. So, with that out of the way, let's get into this video, which I picked pretty much at random from the playlist that he sent me. This is why I don't buy into this crap. It's just dumb.
Welcome back to Carneades.org. Today we're going to be continuing with our series in defense of philosophy. In this video, we're going to be looking at the claim philosophy isn't nonsense.
Shouldn't that be, philosophy is nonsense? Because if you're saying it isn't nonsense, then why do you need a defense of it? Words kind of mean stuff. Just saying. But anyhow, I never said that all philosophy is nonsense. There are plenty of things that it is perfectly serviceable for. But when you get to things like the philosophical arguments for God, crap like that, it's just being misused. You can't philosophize something real into existence. That's not how reality works. So let's get into this and see where it starts going wrong, because I predict that's not going to take very long to get to.
So, upon learning the basics of philosophy, maybe after you've moved past the point of just thinking that, oh, philosophy is just bumper stickers, many people grow concerned that many of the terms in philosophy fail to refer.
I don't care about the words. I care about the practice. I care about getting to actual demonstrable results. I care about getting to actual truth, and by truth, I mean things that are demonstrably real in the world that we all apparently share. If you're going to talk about concepts, fantastic. Philosophy is great for that. It's just when you try to take that random philosophizing out into the realm of science, where you are claiming that your syllogisms are just as good as physical evidence in determining what reality is actually like, that's where I'm going to have problems with it. And there are more problems coming up, don't worry. So let's get back to it.
Things like qualia, propositions, possible worlds, and even hexaides seem spooky, weird, and that they have no real basis in reality.
And a lot of times they don't. Now, this is a problem, not just with philosophy, but with a lot of things, where the people who are really into it make up a lot of big arcane words because they want to sound smart. But that doesn't make them smart. To be fair, a lot of things talked about in philosophy, and since I'm being fair, in a lot of science as well, they could just as well be talked about in everyday language with no real loss of time or effort. A lot of this just becomes in-group shorthand to keep the club together, and I think it's kind of useless if you ask me. Now, I don't care about spooky, weird, or whatever else he was saying, but I do care if these things actually refer to reality in some way, which, sadly, a lot of it doesn't. In fact, a lot of it seems designed for no other reason than to disguise the fact that it's only going on in the head of the philosopher, and who gives a crap about that?
The people that are offering this argument say that you're not really talking about anything that's real, anything that I can experience empirically, anything that's actually out there. Philosophy seems to be talking about objects that don't really exist and are therefore pointless.
And to some degree, that's true. Now, it's not always talking about things that are out there in the physical world, and I'm specifically objecting to the ones where they are asserting real stuff without any methodology or mechanism to support it objectively. That's what I'm actually objecting to. That's what got us here in the first place. I said that specifically in reference to the standard religious philosophical arguments for God, where they will spend a lot of time where they will just spout a bunch of impressive sounding words and conclude, therefore God is real. Wait a minute, that is not how that works. I could spout the exact same list of impressive sounding nonsense and conclude, therefore invisible, intangible, universe creating pixies exist. What changed? Nothing. You haven't established anything with your argument other than the fact that you're an asshole. I expect better. I expect that you're actually getting to a realistic conclusion that is defensible in the real world. I mean, that is what you're talking about after all, right? But they can't do that, can they?
Philosophy is just talking about nonsense. However, philosophy itself is not committed to any of these objects in a real way. There are plenty of positions which deny the existence of these kind of spooky, uncomfortable concepts. And those positions may align well with someone who's just getting into philosophy but hasn't looked into or discovered them yet. However, they also have their own counterintuitive consequences, even if those aren't as readily apparent.
Tell that to the religious. They are trying to establish that their supernatural beliefs actually exist in objective reality. Keep in mind that I'm not trying to disparage all philosophers. Nothing could be further from the truth. I am just pointing out that philosophy is painfully easy to misuse, and it's not just the religious that do it. There are a lot of problems out there that we can't just ignore, and far too many people just want to wander around with the goalposts because philosophy is far too useful a tool to misuse and they don't want to give it up. So now we're going to actually get into something interesting, and I freely admit that I've seen this whole thing before because I kind of had to judge whether or not to make a video out of it, which, this not being a religious video, I think that's fair. So back to it, let's see what he's got.
Do you think that numbers exist, for example?
It depends on what you mean. Numbers certainly exist as concepts that humans made up. There is no two out there just floating around in the ether. It's a useful concept that we invented as a linguistic shorthand for describing a specific idea. Does it exist in reality? No, unless you want to describe it as a particular brain state, which certainly is real as an electrochemical reaction in your head, but I don't think that's what he's talking about. Then philosophers will have these long, drawn-out discussions, and I've seen them do it, over what real is, or what numbers are, or whatever. This is the whole what is, and that's stupid. What do you think you're actually accomplishing that is useful in the real world? Nothing. Nothing at all. Because these are people just throwing out their own personal opinions. They're just throwing them back and forth between each other. And what does that actually prove? Not a damn thing. So how do we demonstrate that either of you are actually correct? We can't, because these are just nonsense concepts. Numbers are useful. In that sense, okay. I don't think that philosophy doing this is, but, that is what it is. It's not actually giving us anything of demonstrable value, at least in my opinion. So, let's continue.
If you don't like spooky concepts and you just want only to have things that you can touch and feel, do you think that numbers exist? Where can you touch or feel a number?
You can't, but then again, I wasn't asking for only physical things, was I? I guess if you want to be technical, I could rip your head open and touch your brain while you're thinking about numbers, and in some sense, I guess I've done it, but saying I don't like spooky stuff, that's not what I'm after. I don't like bullshit. We understand what numbers actually are. No philosophy needed. So this isn't all that impressive. Maybe he's got something better coming up, I don't know. Let's get back and see.
What about colors? Now you might have instances of a color, but what really is green, or what really is blue?
Oh, that's easy. It's a particular wavelength of light. Green is defined as any light between 495 and 570 nanometers. Blue ranges between about 450 and 495. That's what these things actually mean. That's not how we experience them, but that's what they are. That's how we as humans have defined them. Now, if you want to noodle your navel and debate the human experience, go right ahead, I guess. I just don't care. My experience is whatever is actually going on. How I interpret shit doesn't matter. This is why I don't care about anyone's experiences, because you can't show that what you interpreted about something that happened to you is actually real. I care about the truth, not your fee-fees. Fuck your fee-fees. Maybe this is why I am so utterly non-impressed with a lot of random philosophizing, because I don't care about your feelings. What is the sound of one hand clapping? Who cares? I mean, I suppose with a sensitive enough microphone, you can hear the wind as your hand passes, but that's not what they're talking about, is it? You are looking for some metaphysical meaning, which I think is complete bullshit.
Where is the number 2? I can't touch it, I can't feel it, I can see someone scratch something on a page, but that's not the number 2.
Because there is no number 2. It's a concept. It's a series of electrochemical impulses in your brain that we as social creatures have decided, somewhat at random, will be used to represent a pair of objects. 2 isn't significance. 2 is just sounds that you make with your mouth that other people can understand through social and linguistic agreement that it means a certain thing. That's all it is. If you go to other cultures, they'll probably have another word for it. If you go to Mexico, it's dos. If you go to Japan, it's ni. If you talk to someone who has no concept of English whatsoever and you say 2, they're just going to look at you funny. 2 has no larger meaning. If we ever run into aliens and we say 2, they're not going to have the slightest clue what it is that we're talking about. They probably have a concept for two on their own and a word that they use to describe it, but if we don't understand the words, then neither of us is going to have the slightest clue what we're talking about. But these words have no actual meaning in the real world because they're just shit humans came up with.
And if you do believe these things exist, you're probably committed to some pretty strange and weird things.
Like what? Because I'm not, except conceptually. This whole thing comes off like he's trying to say, well, if it sounds weird, then it is weird. But it isn't if you actually understand what's going on. I don't need a philosophical syllogism to understand concepts in my head. Science does just fine. I can look at something that's green and understand that it's green according to the definitions for that word that we have invented for ourselves. Even someone who's colorblind can understand that. Even if they can't see it, it's still green, so long as they can measure those wavelengths. They just need some other way to tell what it is because their sensory organs have failed them. And that's why we've agreed to put green lights in the same place on the traffic light so that you don't have to be able to actually see the colors to understand the intent. So that isn't, ooh, it's spooky. It's just fucking stupid.
But if not, what do you really mean when you say that on your drive you hit 3 green lights?
Hopefully you didn't hit them. That would be kind of messy. It means that on your drive, you passed by 3 signals that, by social convention, tell you that you're legally allowed to go. Why do you need philosophy for this? This is all just mental masturbation.
All of those words seem to have some a little bit strange meaning that you need to unpack in an important way.
Nope. It's all very simple, at least if you're conversant in the social conventions of the areas that you're in. Now, if you're not, that might be a different matter. I was talking to a friend a while back, and he said that the first time he left the country, he saw this sign. And he thought it meant bathroom, because that's not a common sign in the US. Now, he figured it out, of course, but he was used to looking for this because this meant exit to him. Different things for different cultures, and you have to figure out how that culture operates if you're going to be within that culture. Why is this so hard to figure out?
Now, maybe you're not convinced by this. Maybe you think that you can completely explain all of the words that you use. I would highly encourage you to read a very, very short and very accessible paper called Holes.
Read it. Not impressed. This whole thing comes off as an attempt to make very simple things very complex and difficult, which they're really not. No, you can't do that with everything. Complex things are obviously complex, but none of these examples are remotely complex, are they? Maybe if he had used better examples, I might not say, but he didn't. I can only go by what he's actually putting on screen. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to link to the paper in the description if you want to go and read it for yourself. But I wanted to address the very first interaction that they used in the paper between 2 imaginary people called Argle and Bargle. I would never respond to anything this way, but I'm going to read it as it is. It starts off with Argle saying, "I believe in nothing but concrete material objects." Well, I would never say that. I have only seen evidence for concrete material objects, but I would never say that's all that exists, period, full stop. Present convincing evidence to me for something else, and I will accept it, because I follow the evidence where it leads. It's that simple. And then Bargle comes back and says, "Well, I don't like all of your nominalism and materialism." Fuck you. Then present evidence for something else. Go ahead. Claiming something else exists without being able to back it up in some demonstrable way is bullshit. Until you can convince me of something else using something other than your say-so and, "but I really want it to be true," I have no reason whatsoever to take your empty claim seriously. How did you become convinced of that thing that you believe, and what evidence did you follow to get there? Present the evidence that convinced you. And they don't have any answers. It's the same thing the religious are doing. Wishes and dreams and blind faith. Screw that. That's essentially what a lot of philosophers are doing. But it seems to me. Yeah, fuck you. I don't care how it seems to you. I care how we can actually get to the truth of the matter. Come on back when you can do that. I'm not the one being unreasonable here. You are.
It's one of the best illustrations of some of these problems. It's a 7-page, very accessible dialogue by Stephanie Lewis and David Lewis. It's a wonderful expression of how difficult it is to expunge all strange, weird concepts from your life.
No, it's actually easy. You care about what's really going on in the real world. You care about the objective evidence that you can examine without having to believe stuff about it first. There are very few things where you have to say, well, I accept that, on faith. And I can really only think of one, and that's only because of the problem of hard solipsism, which we've talked about many times before. Otherwise, I'm good. Assuming there is a real world out there and we have some kind of access to it, I don't need anything else. If you want me to think that there's something going on out there that you can't define or that you can't prove, you need to show me the evidence that backs it up. It's that simple. If you want me to think that there is a supernatural out there somewhere, show me the evidence for the supernatural. But I can't do that. Then why the fuck do you believe it? What rational reason can you come up with that the stuff that you're claiming without support is real? But I want it to be true. Yeah, fuck you. Your wishes and desires mean nothing. Reality is what it is. Show me how you got there in reality. And they can't do that, can they?
Let alone the simple idea of a whole. It's available free online and it's definitely worth a read.
Look, there's a hole! Come here and I'll push you in it. Now you have objective data that there's a hole. You want me to bury you? Just ask. I need nothing more than that single assumption that we all have to make. I don't have to assume that only the physical exists, because that's still the only thing that we have any evidence for. If you want to propose something else, go ahead. Prove it. Provide your evidence. Back it up. I am open to seeing what you've got. But they've never got anything, do they? They only have excuses. This is where at least some philosophers grab the goalpost and make a break for it downfield. They are just like the religious in that regard. They've got nothing else. How do I know there are holes there? Because there they are. It can't be that hard.
If philosophers use concepts that seem like nonsense, it is only because our intuitive concepts are the problem. They are flawed. They have problems.
No, you have problems. This is the same thing that the religious are doing. They are inventing problems and then just making up solutions that don't demonstrably work. So much for his, well, what if? Yeah, fuck what if. I care about what is. So much of this is just mind games that have no demonstrable place in reality. What do you have to back any of this stuff up? So I know this isn't just a random shower thought. Prove to me that you've got something other than ridiculous brain farts. Do something. Holy shit.
Those intuitive concepts, like the idea of a whole, have problems with them. And so philosophers create these abstract objects, these weird things, so that we can remain consistent and explain away the weird stuff that humans come up with.
Holes are not weird stuff. See that random piece of cheese? Stick your finger in the hole. There you go. No philosophy required at all. All you need is the single assumption that everybody has to make, so that's not remotely out of the norm. In fact, if you don't make that assumption, you can't even have a conversation about it. You can't even think about it yourself because you have no reason to think that you are real. It really is that stupid when it comes right down to it, but these are people who just want to have random shower thoughts and think that they're important. They just really want to believe. How is what they're doing any different than the religious? It's not. They have their faith based on nothing but wishful thinking, just like the religious do. And I think they're all idiots. Come on back when you've got evidence, when you can actually back up the shit that you say with something other than your say-so. And we'll never see them again because they've got nothing. There are things that philosophy is fantastic for. This isn't it. This is just bullshit. These are people who don't want to get real jobs. They just want to get paid for thinking nonsense, just like the religious. If you want to show that it's not nonsense, then by all means, provide your evidence. Demonstrably tie it to the verifiable world that we all live in. Go ahead, do something. They never will, though, which is why the whole thing is just so laughable. And after that, he just lists some of the other videos he's going to do, so we're going to skip over that. That doesn't matter unless somebody wants me to do some more of these. You can let me know that down in the comments, but come on. I mean, they're all going to be this dumb, but hey, I'm open to it if you want me to. I don't care. Like I said, I'm sure that this video is going to just piss at least some people off, and that's fine. I don't pander to anyone. So go ahead, say whatever it is you want to say down in the comments, but don't just make claims. Don't just philosophize. Have something to back yourself up. Because if you can't do that, you're just wasting everyone's time. And we've got enough theists running around wasting our time already. So try to be better than they are. I mean, try. Please try to do better. Because it's kind of hard to do worse.